They give you a suggestion down here to make a small table. You would then come up here and put socket 775 up here in the first column, and then as you're reading the manuals, you would then go through and put a check mark or an X that it supports it or doesn't support it. Well, since it's required they must, as soon as you get to an X that motherboard doesn't support it, you just move on to the next one. You don't have to fill the whole table out. Okay? So you would just put down 775, 462, AM3, 462, or 939. Okay? So I'm going to just click on the first one, and I'm going to click on details. I'm going to scroll up here so we can see.
You click on this.
Actually, I'm looking at, I think they, each time you open it, they reorganize it so that it isn't, you're not looking at, ooh, yeah, everybody pick the first motherboard. That's the answer. They randomize those motherboards.
The 775 you're on?
So I'm looking at the socket 775. Okay? Well, we can look at all the pretty colors that it has, but that's not nearly as much information as if I hit this specification tab. Okay? Then it's actually going to point at everything. All right? Now, let me show you a trick that just so happens to work very handy since everything's electronic. Do Control F and type in fire. Notice how in the directions here, I have FireWire. It needs to support FireWire. But if I scroll down this manual, aha, this does support FireWire. So instead of trying to read and see every word, you can do this. I can also come up here, and what we're also looking for is a PCI Express. And I can scroll over here and realize that we have PCI Express 16. So this board fit both the FireWire and the PCI Express. So then we need to look at 64-bit, 64-bit. It highlights it in the directions. I look at the manual, and this processor can run either a 32 or 64-bit. Okay. Then I can come up here and type in dual core. Oops. No dual care. Okay, dual core. Uh-oh. So let's look at the processor here. 1 or 2 core. So you got to be careful. Dual core and 2 core are the same thing. So you got to be a little careful on that. So it meets that. How about dual channel? I'll just type in the word channel. So there's channel over there. And I got dual channel over here. Wow, we've been really cranking through this. We look at our last one here, and we're looking at 8 gigabytes of memory. Uh-oh. This one only supports what? 4 gig. So we had to go all the way through every one of them until the very last bullet, and that killed this board. So the processor was right, the expansion slots were right, the FireWire, dual core, dual channel, it was the max. That was the problem. So I cannot use this board. Does everybody understand why we eliminated this board? Okay? Right. This says max of 4 gigs. Which means, even though this is pretty and colorful, it's old. Very old. 4 gigs is like the bare minimum now. Okay? So, to speed things up, I just happen to know the one thing that is going to for the rest of the boards are not going to have that we are going to have on the one we need, and that is firewire. So if I look here at the specifications, I can look at this back plate and know right off the bat there is no firewire on this back plate. But I could come up here and type in fire and go to the specifications, and there is no firewire on this. So that one's not our choice. That was the 462. Okay? If I go to the AM...
Did you say which one was in the dual or socket?
Okay, say that all again.
Which one did you eliminate? Like you said.
We socket 775 and 462.
Okay, well there's two of them.
There is two, right. And guess what? They're going to be probably very close to each other. A little different architecture. But I just happen to know that the right answer for this is AM3, so we can get moving. Okay? But so we're going to click this, look at its details, look at the specifications. Now they don't show you a back plate, but you'll be able to come down, hit fire, press enter. There's our firewire. Is number 13. And if you look over here, 13 is, ooh, look at that. It's not on the back plate. It is a plug, a red plug on the side of the board is going to be our firewire. IEEE 1394A is firewire, if you want to know what the IEEE code is for it. Okay? So we're going to need to know this, and we can refer back to this many times. But if you fill out this table, this is going to be the only one that meets all these criteria. Any questions on that? I'm not going to go through all of them. It just will take a little too long. All right? So, the next thing I'm going to do is add the motherboard to my case. Minimize the motherboard and expand the front panel. Now, that red firewire, since it's on the edge of the board, cannot be plugged in. It doesn't have an external port normally. It doesn't have a backplate interface. So what we'd have to do is purchase a front panel interface or an expansion card that would have firewire on it. And then it would even bypass that red plug. But by putting this manufactured multi-port into our computer, we can then plug its wires in, and we're going to end up using that down below there. Okay? So, first thing I'm going to do, though, is before I start adding too many components, I want to make sure that I get my power in there. Okay, well, no, I'll leave the power to last. That's okay. We'll do it last. So, this is tricky. How do you put in this front panel?
We have drive bay?
Yeah, you got to go to drive bay. You would not. Can you put it in here?
No.
No, it doesn't slide in this way. Even in real life, you cannot put this on there. It tells you. Okay? So what you got to do is look at the bay. Now, some of you might have tried this. That is wrong. The reason is, can you see it?
Nope.
It's right there. What did you do? You put it in a bay that had no front plate access. Well, no one's going to be able to plug anything into it if you put it there. So you have to put it in one of these top two. And then when you look at the front, now you can see it. All right? Now I think this is important. I'm going to zoom in on it. And you will see there is, what's this one called? That's your microphone, headset, USB. This is FireWire. But this is 1384A and this is 1394B. So this one supports both of the A and the B plug for FireWire. Okay? So that means that we have to plug these into our motherboard to allow data and power to go through it. Now remember, these are showing power and data. These two here are only going to be doing data. Okay? So we're going to go back to the motherboard, and here's my 3 cables down here. So here I have the front panel, and I have a yellow, a black, a red, and a blue. Okay? If I click on my motherboard, and I click on details, and look at the specification, the first thing I want to do is find out where do I put my sound, right? The microphone and the headset. Can anybody tell me which number on this specification is pointing to the right item? Okay, so 15 is digital audio converter. And that's going to be 15 right in here. Right next to it is, well, here's a front panel audio, 17. So that's probably going to be the one you want to use. It's going to be 17. You'll notice it's green. At least I think so. It's going to be one of these. Most motherboards are going to place audio along this area over here. That is not always, but a standard location to place this kind of stuff. So I click back on the front panel. Here's my audio. And they're allowing me to drop it either on the green or the black. Well, what's nice is if it's the wrong place, it's going to go in. So they liked the green. Okay? And the reason they did that was because it said front panel. It's expecting you to have something that's in the case that you are connecting to the motherboard. All right? Now, the reason I dislike this location is this is usually the farthest away from the case as you can where the controller is, and sometimes this cable gets to be stretched pretty straight and taut. So you have to be like, you had those 2 bays and you might have wanted it at the top, but because of the cable length, because if here's the motherboard and here's your case up like this, well, here's the back plate, your plug is here, I have to either be here or here. If I need an extra inch or 2, I have to choose that bottom one just so I have a little extra play on that cable compared to the top one. Okay? So there are physical limitations when you are trying to decide, can this wire work? And sometimes you just wish, why not 1 more inch? Okay? So now we move to the next one. Connect USB. Where would I drag this black connector from the front panel? Do I have to go look back at the manual? You could, right. What color are they? Blue. There's 1, 2, and 3. There's a 78 USB, there's a 910, and there's an 1112. Don't worry about those numbers. Those are basically port numbers that it is internally indexed. So it can keep track. It does not matter which one of those you put in. They're all going to be USB. Now, what about the red one? What does that say on the motherboard? All right.
13.
That's showing 1394, right? So, when we're looking at this, say, what? Give me that. They just happen to color match. You're going to grab the red one and you're going to pull it. But wait a minute, our front panel had a FireWire A and a FireWire B support. Why is there only one here that's saying FireWire? Oh, there's a blue one too. So blue goes to blue, right? Why not? You're just guessing my tone of voice that that's not right. Well, you're correct.
When the hardware?
Well, yeah, one's FireWire and one's USB. There you go. This says USB, this says FireWire. Just because they're both blue, you don't start plugging stuff in. It's a good way to blow either this component down here or the front panel. Okay? So we are going to leave the blue alone. What this is this will support both of those plugs in front can either go through the red or the blue. So depending upon what motherboard you have, you might use the blue instead of the red. But do not put FireWire into a USB. They are different protocols. They're not going to work right.
That is possible. It will go in that connection.
Oh, yeah. They'll even let you.
Well, that's simulation, dude. Well,
But in the real world, it plugs in just that easy.
So is it like a spare wire?
Well, it's an option.
Okay, so it's like.
The different manufacturer of this says, "Ooh, boy, there are motherboards that will have this red connector and will have this blue connector for FireWire." It could be all Apples are blue and only PCs are red. I don't know. But yeah, in this case, you don't use all the wires. There isn't one of those things where every wire has its place. I'll never forget the first time I dropped my transmission in my car, and how cliche is it, but I had a whole handful of parts left over. I had washers, but I found out the hard way what a bushing washer is. That if you don't put the washer in front of the bushing on your rack and pinion, it will just slide right up over that and your wheel will do this down the highway. And it is a very awkward driving experience to have one tire all by itself just do this and not move the other one. The car doesn't handle very well.
Nope.
You're just hoping you don't hit nobody. Or as they say over in England, my wife and I were over there. I don't know why this sounds so funny to me, but a Bobby went up to her and says, "Come on, dearie, you have to be moving the vehicle, but whatever you do, don't hit anything." I don't know, there's something about when he said that, I just started cracking up. But whatever you do, don't hit anything. All right, so that one we do not plug in. And now, because these are USB and FireWire, they have power running through it, so there is no power plug that needs to be put into this component, which is very, very nice. Okay. So, we come up here. This one's a long one. So we figured out the motherboard. We now are not going to build the entire computer. Couple reasons why. They didn't give us any processors and the slots wide open. Ain't going to do much. They didn't give us any RAM to plug in. But we now have to do one, in my opinion, the hardest item to do in all of PC repair. And that's called the front panel pins. Okay, some of you have done this before are giggling, because yep, it's a bitch. So, I'm going to click on the motherboard, I'm going to go to its details, I'm going to go to its specifications, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. There is one pin rack on that motherboard, and each one of these pins that are black have a specific purpose for a specific thing to be plugged into. This is what I suggest you do. You go to snip and you take a picture of that. Now you've got a hovering window that you can refer to at any time. Instead of trying to open that manual, memorize it, and go back and forth, back and forth. Especially with two screens, use it to your advantage. Okay? All right, so here's the panel. Pin 1 is down here. You'll notice these have pluses and minuses on them. They are not interchangeable. Now, in this particular lab, it does not matter because you can't flip positive and negative. And in most cases, you can flip them. They're bipolar. Bipolar? I think there's a more appropriate word for that, but
No,
Um,
it's bipolar.
the speaker, if it has only 2 wires and 2 grounds in the middle, a speaker is fairly basic. It will run in either polarity. But not all things do that. So, ever noticed how a 3-prong plug nowadays has the top 2 prongs, one's bigger than the other? Why is that?
Keep the polarity straight.
Yeah, so that they say like, boom, we know it's coming through here and this, so they don't have to play around with flip-flopping it in the electronics. The flow's important. Okay? So, speaker, what do you think that is? Huh?
Your speakers?
Which speakers?
CPU speaker. Or the case speaker.
It's the case speaker. Sometimes it's smaller than the thumbnail that you have. I mean, literally a little. You see the ones we'll give you downstairs, they're smaller than a dime. And that's the speaker. All it's there for is beeping codes for real life. It's not going to speak to you. You're not going to hear your letter from your mama, your papa from on that little speaker, but you will hear error beep codes. Okay, reset. I haven't even seen a system with reset in years. But there used to be they would still support a reset button if your panel has it. What do you think this one does? PWRSW.
Power.
Power what?
Saver.
Power switch. Because we also have PLED.
Power.
That's power what?
LED.
The light bulb on you. Look at your computer. See that start button? There's a light on it, right? That is the PLED. That lets you know, don't be pressing buttons. It's already on, fool. You're just going to be messing up my work if you're going around pressing that button and it's already on. What do you think this one is?
Your idle.
Good guess, but no. What else does IDE stand for?
The hard drive.
It's hard drives. It's an older hard drive. Most of the time you'll see this as showing you HDD LED. But IED is an older version of SATA. So older boards deal with this. Okay? So it's very important you hit these. Now, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to zoom in to where this is located. It's this white pin board right here. So I can drag this over, and you can see that we have 2 pins here, 2 here, 1 missing here, 2 here, 4 there, and 2 here. All right, so does everybody know what our goal is?
Plug-in stuff.
Plug-in stuff. Very good. Now, what am I have to press on to get the cables to plug in here?
The cables from the kits.
The case. So if I come over here and I click the case, if there are wires coming from the front panel of the case, these wires will appear here. Otherwise, they'll be loose inside your box and you have to find them. Okay? So I'm going to slide over and you'll see we have a power switch. Okay? So I look here at my diagram. My power switch is going to be these 2 in the front. I like to, in these simulations, always fill the top row first. And you'll see why here in a second. So this one here is PLED, the power LED light. So if you look here, power LED, I click, and I drop it onto those 2 top pins in the upper left corner, and I drop it. Notice how that cable is showing you loops up, lays up. If I did the bottom row first, I'm actually going to cover up the pins that I need to keep plugging the top row in. So this is just one of those hints when doing this. Now imagine you got to put your eyeballs in there and your fingers in there and actually get this to work inside of a computer. Funsies. Okay?
So the HDD LED is the IDE?
Correct. So we're going to do the speaker first, and that goes in the upper right. So we got the big 4, it's the only one that's 4 wide, 4 pins wide, that goes up in the upper right, and our power LED is in the upper left. So now we come over here to the hard drive LED. We put that in the lower left. Can you imagine trying to put that back one on there when this one's already in? It's difficult. You can do it though. And then the last one here is, let's see, what's my lower right, is going to be my power switch. So I come over here to power switch and I drop it onto these two. This is the reset. Notice that I do not have a front panel reset cable. So the motherboard supports it, but the case doesn't support it. And that will happen a lot. You will have, remember the motherboard manufacturers are trying to make it as flexible as possible. But they're different manufacturers, cases and motherboards. So you're going to have some things that don't match up, or the motherboard's way more powerful than the case, so the case has got way more features than the motherboard has. All right, now we have these two little guys. Now in this diagram, do you see anything about fans? No. Okay, and you can come down to these and actually zoom in on them. Flip it around. So this is a 3-pin, and notice this notch. Power for fans are very specific. You will see 3 pins on the motherboard with a plastic like backing, which is going to slide into this groove. Again, keeping you from messing up the polarity. If you try to flip this around, the plastic backing would try to go through the top of this plug, won't fit. Turn it around, slides right in very cleanly. And you'll see this lots of times when we go down to 113, which is next week. Oh, means I gotta set some stuff up. Now, if we go back to the motherboard, we go back to the specifications, we now have to find, who can find me front case fan power? What number on this diagram? 3 and? 3. You're getting both 3. CPU, chassis, fan power, 4-pin, 3-pin for all others. Okay? So we close this and we scroll, we move up here. Okay? And here are our 3 pins and that little plastic backing. So now the worst thing is I got to slide over here, press the front case, slide back over here, grab one of my fans, they're both 3-pin, and click and drop it on that area. And the other one just happens to be on the other side of our 24-pin main power. So I drop it over here. So I zoom out. Here were the 2 powers, and here's my 24-pin. Now my front panel is, one of this case, is now 100% connected. Everybody up with that? Any questions? Okay. So they did that. Rear fan, front fan, all these. We now need to connect the following to the power supply. Click the power supply, grab the 24-pin, drop it in here. Only one place for that. This power supply has a CPU power 4-pin and 8-pin. Which one does this motherboard support?
4-pin.
4-pin only. So we click and we drag. There is going to be no place for this 6-pin on this particular board. Newer boards will come with 6. So we did what it said, motherboard power, CPU power. We did the USB, FireWire, and the audio. So we're done. That's all they wanted us to do. There's no power up. There's way too many other things missing. So hopefully we hit done and we got full credits. All right? That one took a while, didn't it? Figuring out which motherboard you need, figuring out how to do the front panels, how to do third-party front panel plugs for FireWire and sound and USB. No questions?